Something happened over the skies of Iran that the United States government is not going to confirm, that no official spokesperson is going to stand at a podium and describe in detail, and that the full classified record of will likely remain locked behind layers of security clearance and institutional secrecy for years, or possibly decades to come. But the evidence of what happened is visible in the wreckage, in the market movements, in the desperate and furious public statements emanating from Tehran in the days that followed, and in the carefully worded non-denials coming from Washington that say everything precisely by saying almost nothing at all. Something was unleashed over Iran that, by every public understanding of what the United States military openly acknowledges possessing, should not have been capable of doing what it did. The results on the ground speak to capabilities that official inventories do not account for, that publicly available defense budgets do not obviously fund, and that the Iranian military, for all its years of preparing for exactly this kind of confrontation, had absolutely no answer for when the moment arrived. What the United States just deployed over Iran exists in that narrow and extraordinary category of military capability that governments spend billions of dollars and decades of engineering effort developing specifically so that when it is finally used, the enemy has no warning, no defense, and no framework for understanding what just happened to them until it is already over. To understand why what happened over Iran matters so profoundly, and why the classified nature of what was deployed is itself a critical part of the story, you need to start with what Iran thought it had built. The Iranian regime has not been naive or passive in its approach to the possibility of American or Israeli military action against its territory and its most strategically significant assets. For decades, Iran has been systematically and deliberately constructing what its military planners believed was an impenetrable layered air defense, architecture designed specifically to defeat the kinds of strike packages that American and Israeli air forces are publicly known to be capable of generating. Iran's air defense network incorporates Russian-supplied S-300 systems, domestically developed equivalents and adaptations, radar networks designed to provide overlapping coverage with minimal exploitable gaps, and hardened command and control infrastructure engineered to maintain functionality even under significant electronic attack. Its nuclear and strategic facilities are buried under enormous volumes of reinforced concrete and earth, placed inside mountain complexes, and protected by multiple overlapping layers of both active air defense and passive hardening, designed to defeat all but the most specialized and most powerful penetrating munitions in existence. Iran looked at what the United States had publicly demonstrated it could do in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, and in Syria, studied those operations with the focused attention of a nation that knew it was on a potential target list, and built its defenses specifically to defeat those demonstrated capabilities. What Iran never fully accounted for was the category of capability that the United States had been developing in absolute secrecy, testing in conditions that generated no observable signature, and holding in reserve for precisely the kind of high-stakes, high-consequence moment that Operation Epic Fury represented. The classified world of American military technology operates on a timeline that is entirely disconnected from anything the public, the press, or even most of the government's own oversight structures can observe or account for. Programs that eventually become public knowledge through official announcements, congressional testimony, and or the inevitable leakage of information over time, typically reach operational deployment years, or in some cases over a decade before their existence is acknowledged. The B-2 Spirit stealth bomber flew its first flight in 1989 and was not publicly revealed until that same year, but the program had been running in deep black status for years before that, consuming billions of dollars that appeared in defense budgets under obscure and deliberately misleading line items. The F-117 Nighthawk flew operationally for years before its existence was acknowledged. These are the programs we know about because they eventually became public. The programs that have not yet become public, the capabilities that remain in active operational use under full classification, represent a layer of American military power that is by definition invisible to any analysis based on open sources alone. What was used over Iran belongs to that category, and the specific characteristics of what it accomplished point toward capabilities in at least two domains that the United States has never publicly acknowledged possessing at the level of sophistication that the Iranian operation required. The first domain is electronic warfare and electromagnetic spectrum operations at a scale and a level of precision that goes far beyond anything in the public. Iran's air defense network went dark in a manner and at a speed that the systems Iran was operating should not have been vulnerable to given their design specifications and the countermeasures that Iranian engineers had spent years building into them. The S-300 and its variants are specifically designed with resistance to electronic jamming and spoofing as a core design requirement, informed by decades of Soviet and Russian experience studying American electronic warfare capabilities and engineering around their known limitations. For those systems to have failed in the way and at the speed that the evidence suggests they failed, something was used against them that operates in ways those systems were never designed to defend against, that exploits vulnerabilities in their architecture that their designers either did not know existed or did not believe any adversary had yet identified and weaponized. The electronic warfare capability deployed over Iran that night was not a more powerful version of known American jamming systems. It was something operating on different principles, achieving different effects, and doing so with a speed and a completeness that left Iranian operators without the seconds of warning they would have needed to implement even the emergency procedures their doctrine prescribed for exactly this kind of attack. The second domain is penetrating strike capability against deeply buried and massively hardened targets, and this is where the classified nature of what was used becomes most significant and most revealing. Iran's most strategically important facilities are not sitting on the surface waiting to be hit by conventional munitions. They are underground, inside mountains, under hundreds of feet of reinforced concrete, protected by geology and engineering in combination in ways that the publicly known inventory of American penetrating weapons, including the massive ordnance penetrator, cannot reliably defeat at the depths involved. The massive ordnance penetrator is the most capable publicly acknowledged bunker-busting weapon in the American arsenal, capable of penetrating approximately 200 feet of reinforced concrete before detonating. Iranian engineers know exactly what that weapon can do because its capabilities have been publicly discussed in defense literature and congressional testimony for years. They built their most sensitive facilities at depths and with protection configurations specifically designed to survive a direct hit from the weapon they knew represented the current public limit of American hard target defeat capability. What hit those facilities was not the massive ordnance penetrator operating at its known performance parameters. The damage patterns, the depth of effects, and the specific nature of what was destroyed point toward a penetrating capability that exceeds the publicly known ceiling by a margin that is not explained by incremental improvement or operational optimization. It is explained by a program that does not officially exist, reaching a facility that was built on the assumption that no existing weapon could reach it. The delivery systems involved in getting these capabilities to their targets add another layer to the classified picture that deserves to be understood. Iran's air defense network, even in its degraded state following the electronic warfare assault that preceded the kinetic phase of the operation, was not simply switched off like a light. There were elements of it that remained partially functional, that retained some capacity to track and engage incoming threats even as the broader network was being systematically dismantled. The strike packages that reached their targets did so in a manner that suggests delivery platforms operating with a radar, cross-section and a flight profile that pushed the boundaries of detectability in ways that publicly acknowledged American stealth aircraft, as impressive as they are, do not fully account for. The B-21 Raider, America's newest publicly acknowledged stealth bomber, represents a genuine generational advance over the B-2 in low observable technology. But the B-21 has only recently entered operational service, and its specific capabilities remain largely classified even though its existence is public. What flew over Iran may have included B-21s operating at the outer edge of their classified performance envelope, or it may have included something that has not yet been publicly revealed at all, an unmanned penetrating strike platform that has been in development under deep classification for long enough to have reached a level of capability that makes the aircraft categories the public knows about look like yesterday's technology. The evidence does not allow a definitive answer on the specific platforms involved. It does allow the conclusion that whatever flew those missions got through defenses that should have been able to engage them, And it did so without the kind of losses or near misses that publicly known platforms operating against those defenses would predictably have experienced. The role that intelligence played in making all of this possible connects directly to the Ukrainian dimension of what happened, and it is a connection that runs deeper and is more operationally significant than almost any public reporting has yet captured. Ukraine has spent 3 years developing intelligence collection capabilities directed at exactly the kinds of Iranian military systems that stood between American strike packages and their targets over Iran. Every Shah drone that Ukraine has shot down, captured, or reverse-engineered has added to a detailed technical picture of Iranian manufacturing processes, component sourcing, software architecture, and system vulnerabilities that no American intelligence collection effort, operating from the outside, could have built to the same depth or with the same granularity. Ukrainian operators who have spent years jamming, spoofing, hacking, and physically defeating Russian-deployed Iranian drone systems developed an understanding of those systems and their technical cousins in Tehran's air defense architecture that translated directly into actionable intelligence for the planning and execution of what happened over Iran. The specific frequencies, the specific timing vulnerabilities, the specific gaps in Iranian radar coverage that Ukrainian intelligence had identified through years of operational experience with Iranian technology on the Ukrainian battlefield, all of that fed into the operational planning for Epic Fury in ways that made the difference between a strike package that got through and one that did not. Ukraine's contribution was not peripheral or supplementary. It was foundational, and the classified systems the United States deployed could not have been employed with the precision and the confidence that the operation required without the intelligence foundation that only Ukraine could provide. The aftermath of what happened over Iran has played out in ways that confirm the scale and the significance of what the classified capabilities achieved. Oil markets moved with the kind of violence that follows genuinely consequential disruptions to regional stability and supply security, generating the price surge that nearly delivered $1 billion windfall to Putin's regime before Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian Baltic ports intercepted that financial benefit. Iran's public response combined fury and carefully calibrated vagueness in a combination that is itself revealing, loudly asserting that Iran's defenses performed as designed while conspicuously avoiding any specific description. When a military power that has invested decades and enormous resources in a specific defensive capability responds to an attack on that capability with statements that are long on nationalist defiance and short on technical specifics, are not things that power wants to publicly acknowledge. Iran's air defense community knows what it encountered over those targets. I did decision to describe that encounter in the vague and propagandistic terms that Tehran's public statements employed, rather than in the specific and operational terms that a military after-action report would use, is a decision made by people who understand that the specific truth of what happened would be more damaging to Iranian deterrence than any amount of nationalist rhetoric can compensate for. Inside the American defense and intelligence establishment, the successful operational use of capabilities that have been developed over years or decades at enormous expense and under absolute secrecy represents a moment of both validation and consequence. Validation because the systems worked, because the classified investment paid off in operational results that could not have been achieved with publicly known capabilities. That because the specific combination of electronic warfare, penetrating strike, low observable delivery, and deep intelligence fusion that Epic Fury required was achieved with the precision and the completeness that the planners had designed. Consequence because once a classified capability is used operationally, its existence becomes knowable to adversaries who study the results carefully enough. Its specific parameters become subjects of active enemy collection and analysis, and the window of exclusive advantage that secrecy provided begins to close. China's military analysts are studying what happened over Iran right now with the same focused intensity that Iran spent years studying American conventional operations. Russia's defense industrial complex is doing the same. The fact that they cannot yet fully characterize what was used does not mean they will not eventually develop a working model of its capabilities from the observable evidence of its effects. And the American defense establishment is aware that the clock on the exclusivity of what was deployed over Iran started running the moment those systems were used. What the United States unleashed over Iran that night sits at the intersection of multiple classified developmental streams that have been running in parallel for years, fed by the kind of patient long-term investment in fundamental capability that does not produce visible short-term results and that consequently struggles for resources in political environments that reward immediate and demonstrable returns. The electronic warfare programs, the penetrating munitions programs, the low observable platform programs, the artificial intelligence-enabled targeting programs that together made what happened over Iran possible were not the products of any single administration's priorities or any single defense budget cycle's decisions. They are the accumulated output of sustained investment across administrations of both parties, sustained by the professional military and intelligence communities that understand the difference between the capabilities that can be publicly discussed and the capabilities that must be secretly maintained, and that have made the case internally, year after year, for the programs that produce the kind of results that Epic Fury delivered. Those results validate not just the specific technologies used, but the entire philosophy of classified capability development that produced them the belief that the most consequential military advantages are the ones that an adversary does not know exist until they are already being used against them, and that by the time the adversary understands what hit them, the strategic moment has already passed and the outcome has already been determined. What hit Iran's most protected targets should not, by any public accounting, have been able to reach them. That it did is the whole point. And it is a point that changes calculations in every capital, where someone is currently deciding whether American military power is something they need to take seriously as a constraint on their ambitions. The answer, delivered over Iran in a single night by systems that officially should not exist, is an unambiguous and permanent yes.